The air in Hokkaido was crisp, carrying the faint scent of decay as I approached the abandoned hospital. Its walls, once a sterile white, were now a canvas for nature's relentless reclaiming, ivy creeping through shattered windows, paint peeling like skin after a sunburn. I came here for the stories, the kind that linger in the silence between breaths, captured through the lens of my camera. The kind that most people are too afraid to seek. My name is Akira, and I am a photographer drawn to the forgotten places, where the past whispers to those willing to listen. The hospital loomed before me, its empty windows like hollow eyes watching my every move. The weight of my camera around my neck was a comforting presence, a tool to document the unseen. As I stepped inside, the floorboards groaned under my weight, a sound so loud in the oppressive silence that it made my heart skip a beat. The air was thick with dust, each breath a struggle against the musty decay. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing corridors lined with rusted gurneys and broken medical equipment. The further I ventured, the heavier the air became, as if the building itself was resisting my intrusion. Then, I heard it, the faintest whisper, so soft I thought it might be the wind. But there was no wind inside these walls. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The whisper came again, this time from behind me. I turned, my flashlight beam slicing through the darkness, but there was nothing there. Just the empty hallway, stretching into oblivion. My hands trembled as I raised my camera, snapping a photo of the corridor. The flash illuminated the decay in stark relief, casting long shadows that seemed to move when I looked away. I played back the image on the camera's screen, and that's when I saw it, a figure, barely visible, standing at the end of the hall. My blood ran cold. I hadn't seen anyone when I took the photo. I took another, then another, each time the figure appearing closer, its form more defined. The whispers grew louder, forming words I couldn't quite make out. My heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat of terror urging me to flee. But curiosity anchored me in place. I needed to know, to understand. The next photo revealed the figure right beside me, its face a blur of shadows. The whispers were clear now, a chorus of voices pleading, "Help us." I stumbled back, the camera slipping from my grasp. The screen cracked, but the images remained, the figure now reaching out. The air grew colder, the whispers a deafening roar in my ears. I ran, the sound of my own screams lost in the cacophony. I don't know how I made it out, but I did. The photos were lost, the camera destroyed. Yet, sometimes, in the silence of my own home, I hear the whispers again, calling my name. And I wonder, was it ever really abandoned, or were the shadows just waiting for someone to listen? Break time equals fives, greater than the whispering shadows of Japan, unexplained phenomena in the land of the rising sun. The script begins with the sound of rustling leaves and distant thunder, setting the stage for a remote mountain and nestled deep within the Japanese countryside. The main character, Alex, a solo traveler seeking solace from the hustle of city life, arrives at the inn as dusk falls. The inn, with its traditional wooden architecture and paper-thin walls, exudes an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards. Alex, though initially charmed by the inn's quaint beauty, feels an inexplicable unease as the night progresses. The first sign of the supernatural comes when Alex, lying in bed, hears hushed voices murmuring from beneath the floor. The voices are indistinct, a cacophony of whispers that seem to rise and fall with the wind. Alex's heart races as the reality of being alone in the supposedly empty inn clashes with the undeniable presence of the voices. The innkeeper, a stoic figure with a knowing gaze, insists the inn has been vacant for weeks, fueling Alex's paranoia. As the night wears on, the whispers grow louder, more insistent, as if trying to communicate. Alex's attempts to rationalize the phenomena, dismissing them as the wind or the settling of the old building, fail as the voices begin to form coherent words, calling Alex's name. The climax occurs when Alex, driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, lifts a loose floorboard to reveal nothing but darkness and a sudden, deafening silence. The script ends with Alex sitting in the dim light of dawn, the innkeeper's words echoing in their mind, leaving the audience to wonder about the thin veil between the living and the dead in the land of the rising. Sunday break time equals 5s, greater than the night air in Tokyo was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain from earlier in the evening. The back streets, usually bustling with life, were eerily silent, save for the occasional distant hum of a passing car. The streetlights cast long, narrow shadows that seemed to stretch infinitely towards the unseen corners of the alleyways. It was here, amidst the solitude of the night, that Akira found himself walking home after a long shift at the izakaya where he worked. His footsteps echoed softly against the pavement, a rhythmic sound that normally brought him comfort. But tonight, it felt as though the sound was being swallowed by the darkness around him. Akira tightened his coat around him, the fabric rustling loudly in the quiet. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Then, just as he passed a particularly narrow alley, he heard it, his name, whispered so softly it could have been the wind. Akira. He stopped dead in his tracks, his heart pounding in his chest. Slowly, he turned towards the alley, his eyes scanning the darkness. There was nothing there. Just the cold, empty gaze of the streetlight flickering above. Akira let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding and continued on his way, chalking it up to his tired mind playing tricks on him. But then it happened again. And again. Each time, the whisper grew slightly louder, more insistent. Akira. Akira. Each time he turned, there was nothing. The streets seemed to close in around him, the shadows deepening. His breath came in short, sharp gasps as fear began to take hold. He quickened his pace, his shoes slapping against the wet pavement. The whispers followed him, now coming from multiple directions, overlapping, growing in volume until they were nearly shouting in his ears. Akira broke into a run, his heart racing, his vision blurring with unshed tears. He didn't dare look back. Finally, he reached his apartment building, fumbling with his keys before throwing himself inside and slamming the door behind him. He leaned against it, sliding to the floor as he tried to calm his racing heart. The whispers had stopped. But as he sat there in the silence of his apartment, a new fear took root. What if they weren't outside anymore? What if they were inside with him? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. Akira knew he wouldn't be sleeping tonight. The whispers had left him with a lingering unease, a question that would haunt him in the days to come. Were they ever really there? Or had the shadows of Tokyo simply gotten into his head? Either way, he knew one thing for certain: he would never walk those back streets alone at night again. Break time equals 5s, greater than the air was thick with the scent of rust and decay as I stepped through the broken gates of the abandoned theme park, my camera rolling to capture the eerie silence that had swallowed this place whole. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets as they stretched across the cracked pavement. I had come here drawn by the stories, the legends of unexplained phenomena that clung to this forsaken place like the ivy that choked its structures. My heart pounded with a mix of excitement and dread, the thrill of the unknown pushing me forward into the heart of the park. The further I ventured, the more the silence seemed to press against my ears, a tangible presence that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Then, I saw them, fresh footprints in the thick layer of dust that coated the ground, leading unmistakably towards the carousel at the center of the park. My breath caught in my throat as I followed the trail, each step echoing too loudly in the oppressive quiet. The carousel, a relic of joy now twisted into something macabre under the moonlight, stood silent and still. Until it wasn't. Without warning, the carousel sprang to life, the once vibrant colors now faded and peeling, spinning with a creaking groan that sounded almost like a scream. The music, if you could call it that, was distorted, a haunting melody that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. I stumbled back, my camera nearly slipping from my grasp as the carousel turned faster, the figures of horses and chariots blurring into a nightmarish whirl. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before, the only evidence of what had transpired: the faint scent of electricity in the air and the undeniable feeling that I was not alone. My rational mind screamed at me to leave, To run and never look back, but something, curiosity, fear, I couldn't say, rooted me to the spot. That's when I heard it, a whisper so soft I might have imagined it, calling my name from the shadows. The decision to flee came too late. The shadows seemed to reach for me, their whispers growing louder, more insistent, until they were all I could hear. My last coherent thought was a desperate hope that my camera had captured enough to prove I wasn't crazy, that something in this forsaken place had noticed me, and it wasn't letting me go. The footage, if it exists, ends there, a shaky image of the carousel, the moonlight glinting off its surface, before the screen cuts to black. They say the park is still there, waiting, its whispers growing louder with each passing night. And sometimes, if you listen closely, you can hear the carousel start to spin. Break time equals fives, greater than the night was deep, the kind of deep where the world outside the old Kyoto library seemed to have faded into a distant memory. The air inside was thick, not just with the dust of centuries but with something else, something intangible that made the back of my neck prickle. I had come here to study, to lose myself in the ancient texts that lined the shelves, but as the hours passed, the silence grew heavier, more oppressive. It was then that I first felt it, a breath, cold and deliberate, against the nape of my neck. I spun around, heart hammering against my ribs, but there was nothing there. Just the endless rows of books, their spines cracked with age. Shaking it off as fatigue, I turned back to my work, only to freeze. The page before me, once filled with the neat script of a historical account, was now adorned with an illustration I could swear hadn't been there before. It depicted a figure, slender and shadowed, its features blurred as if seen through water. The more I stared, the more the lines seemed to shift, to move. A whisper, so soft it might have been the wind, slithered past my ear. My breath came in short, sharp gasps as the pages began to turn on their own, each one revealing more of those impossible illustrations. Figures with elongated limbs, faces stretched in silent screams, scenes of despair that clawed at my sanity. I tried to close the book, but my fingers passed through it as if it were made of smoke. The whispers grew louder, forming words in a language I didn't understand but felt in the marrow of my bones. Desperate, I stumbled back, knocking over a stack of books. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence, and for a moment, everything stopped. The book lay closed on the table, innocuous. The whispers faded. But the air still thrummed with something unseen. I knew then that I wasn't alone, that I had stumbled into a place where the past wasn't just remembered, it was alive. And it had noticed me. With trembling hands, I gathered my things, the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on me. As I fled into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows between the streetlights were just a bit darker, a bit more solid than they should be. And though I never returned to that library, I sometimes wake to the sound of pages turning in the dark, and the whisper of a voice that calls my name in a tongue not of this world. Break time equals fives, greater than the apartment in Osaka was everything I had hoped for when I moved to Japan. Small, but efficient, with a view of the bustling streets below that made me feel connected to the city's vibrant life. The rent was surprisingly affordable, a fact I attributed to the building's age and the lack of modern amenities. But from the first night, something felt off. The air was thick with an unplaceable tension, a silence that was too heavy, too expectant. I dismissed it as the natural unease of being in a new country, alone, in an unfamiliar place. Then, the laughter started. It was faint at first, almost indistinguishable from the distant hum of the city. But as the nights passed, it grew clearer, unmistakably the sound of a child's laughter, carefree and light, echoing through the empty corridors of the building. I told myself it must be coming from the street, or a neighboring apartment, though I had never seen any children in the building. The super had assured me the place was quiet, mostly occupied by single professionals and elderly residents. The laughter was joined by the sound of small feet running, pitter-pattering down the hallway outside my door, stopping just short of it, as if the child was waiting, listening. I would lie in bed, my heart pounding, straining to hear any other sound, any indication that what I was hearing was real. But there was never anything more, just the laughter and the footsteps, always at the same time, just past midnight. I began to dread the night, to fear the moment the clock would strike 12 and the sounds would begin anew. I tried rationalizing it, convincing myself it was the building settling, or pipes rattling, but deep down, I knew it was neither. The sounds were too deliberate, too alive. One night, unable to take it anymore, I flung open my door, determined to confront whatever, or whoever, was out there. The hallway was empty, silent. The laughter stopped as suddenly as it had started. But as I stood there, shivering in the cold night air, I felt it, a presence, something unseen but undeniably there, watching me. I slammed the door shut, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The next day, I asked the super again about the building's history, about any reports of strange occurrences. He laughed it off, saying the building was old, but nothing unusual had ever happened there. But the look in his eyes told a different story, a flicker of something, fear? Recognition? That night, the sounds didn't come. Nor the next. I began to relax, to think maybe it had all been in my head. But then, on the third night, as I lay in bed, half asleep, I heard something new. A whisper, so soft I almost missed it, right next to my ear. "Play with me." I froze, my blood turning to ice. The voice was unmistakably that of a child, but it wasn't playful or inviting. It was desperate, hungry. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, and by morning, I had made up my mind. I couldn't stay there any longer. I gave notice that day, packing my things with a frantic urgency. As I carried the last box to my car, I glanced up at the building one final time. In the window of what I knew to be an empty apartment, a small figure stood, its face pressed against the glass, watching me leave. I drove away without looking back, but even now, miles away, in the safety of a new apartment, I can't shake the feeling that something followed me. That somewhere, in the quiet of the night, the laughter will start again, and this time, it won't stop.